What's up, dear YouTube viewers? The World Cup in the United States, Canada, and Mexico has already started. While some matches have already been played, most of the World Cup still remains untouched. And many of the favorites of this World Cup, like Brazil, Portugal, and England, still haven't started their games. So I decided to record a video where I am gonna say the top 10 biggest questions I have for this World Cup and the top 10 things that I would most want to see happen. The top 10 intrigues that I would most want answered. Some people might say it's too late because the World Cup has already started, but like I said before, the favorites still have not played their game, so many answers still remains to be seen. Now, some of the questions I have are pretty basic that probably every World Cup fan has, every soccer fan, and some of the questions that I have are unique and probably not many of you have thought of them. So I'm gonna go over all of them. Okay, let's start. At number one, it's pretty basic. Who will win the World Cup? It's a question that I'm sure every fan wants to know the answer to and that everyone is thinking about. For me, as I told you before, the number one favorite to win the whole tournament is Spain, because it seems that they have everything they need for a successful tournament. A very easy group with teams like Saudi Arabia and Cape Verde, who, with all respect to them, are clearly far worse than Spain in terms of soccer. Very good squad depth, and even without players from Real Madrid like Dean Huijsen, Spain still has one of the deepest squads in the whole tournament. Although I still think that De La Fuente should have taken Huijsen and maybe some other Real Madrid players. But this is a topic that I will discuss in a separate video. However, even without him, Spain still has a deep squad, an easy group, and also not the hardest schedule and not the hardest run in terms of the amount of moving from city to city that they have to do. Also, another team who could probably win the World Cup right now is Portugal. The reason why is their midfield with João Neves and Vitinha, who are one of the best at their position, plus Nuno Mendes, who has successfully battled some of the best attackers in the world, such as Michael Olise, Mohamed Salah, and Lamine Yamal. And of course Cristiano Ronaldo himself, who is determined to have an impact at his last World Cup. Also, I think England could realistically win the World Cup, because they have a very good midfield with Declan Rice, Champions League final, Jude Bellingham, who even though he hasn't had the most convincing season at Real Madrid, is still a good soccer player, and Kobbie Mainoo. No, and the first favorite who I would say could win the World Cup is France, because they have one of the best attack with Champions League winners Dembele and Doué, plus Kylian Mbappe, who had a very good season at Real Madrid, even though the club itself didn't do so good, and Michael Olise, who was one of the reasons why Bayern got to the semi-final. Those are my top 4 favorites, as I have said in a past video. Personally, unlike many people, I don't really hype Brazil or Argentina this much, because Brazil hasn't made the most convincing squad selections, and some of their players haven't had the best season. And Argentina is still relying too much on Lionel Messi when he can no longer carry the team on his shoulders single-handedly like he did in 2022. But that is a topic that I will say in another question of who will fail the World Cup. At number 2, I have the question of who will be the dark horse at this World Cup. Now, every year we see a sensational team that many people consider an outsider that makes it very far. For example, in 22 we saw Turkey made it to the semi-final and South Korea too. In 2006 we saw my home country of Ukraine made it to the quarterfinals. And yes, even though they had a decently easy group with Tunisia and Saudi Arabia, that still doesn't change the fact that what they achieved was remarkable. In 2010 we saw Paraguay make it out of the group stage. In 2014 we saw Costa Rica get all the way to the quarterfinal, regardless of many people considering them the outsider in the group of death. In 2018 we saw Croatia make it all the way to the final, regardless of not being the favorites of the World Cup. And we also saw the host Russia, who many people were skeptical about, even inside of Russia themselves, make it to the quarterfinals, where they showed a very admirable game against Croatia, even though they ended up losing it at the end. In 2022 we saw Morocco made it to the semi-final, eliminating favorites such as Spain and Portugal along the way. I think in 2026 we could see something like that again. The teams that I think could most likely do it are, as I said before, Ivory Coast, because they have the 11th most expensive squad of the whole tournament, and many of their players such as Yan Diomande and Ousmane Diomande are on the wanted list of many top clubs in Europe. I absolutely see Ivory Coast putting up a good game against Ecuador and Curacao, and even Germany doesn't look as an unbeatable opponent, considering that they didn't make it out of the group stage in the last two tournaments. After that, it really depends on who their opponent is, but if they are able to get second place in the group, at least, their opponent will most likely not be super hard. Which means they will be able to make it at least to the round of 16. And maybe even further, because we already saw them beat France once, so who knows, maybe they could beat another team who many people were considering the favorites. Another team that I believe could absolutely do it is Norway, because they have one of the best attacks in the whole tournament, with the second best goal scorer in La Liga, Sørloth, one of the best players of the whole time, Erling Haaland, and Jørgen Strand Larsen, who also had some very good displays. However, unfortunately for them, their group is by no means easy. They are put with the 2 times back-to-back finalists of the World Cup France, African champions Senegal, at least on the field, and Iraq, who even though on paper look less strong than all the other teams in the group, still showed up good results, such as a draw with Spain, so they can't underestimate anyone in their group. But I think that they could still make it out of the group and at least go to the round of 16, and maybe even further. Another team that I believe could absolutely do it is one of the two co-hosts, Mexico or the USA. Both of them started their first two games at the World Cup very convincingly, with, with a victory over Paraguay and South Africa. Yes, they were not the strongest teams out there, but still, the victory was very convincing. The United States won 4-1, and Mexico won 2-0. It probably could have even won 4-0 had the South African goalkeeper not made some remarkable saves. So I think Mexico and the USA have what it takes to go far in this tournament. Okay, question number 3 I have for this tournament is who will be the failure of the whole tournament. Many fans tend to divide the World Cup between favorites and outsiders, but it's really not that simple. Like I said before, a lot of times we see how a team who many people consider an outsider makes it very far. And a lot of other times we see a team who many people were saying were the favorites to win the whole tournament, failing to make it out of the group stage. For example, in 2022 we saw Belgium flop, and in 2018 and 2022 Germany didn't make it out of the group stage. So the question for this tournament is, will this tournament be an exact replica, and will there be a team that does below their fans' standards? Now for me, I personally have a couple of candidates for this team. First of all, Argentina. Yes, Argentina won the World Cup in 2022. But back then, Messi was playing in a top club in Europe, PSG, and always had practice against very tough opponents. Now Messi is playing against Inter Miami, where the opponents in MLS, with all my respect to this league, are far less tough than the opponents even in League One, and for sure less tough than the Champions League. So will Messi arrive in the Argentina national football team with full training? That's the question. I think it's time for somebody else to take the leadership into his hands, and for Messi to transfer the crown to someone else. Now for me, I don't see a player who could do it right now. Alvarez could potentially do it in 4 more years, but right now he's still young. He could score a couple of good goals, but I don't think he could be the single-handed the leader who scores in every single match. Lautaro Martinez on paper should be the number 1 person to do it, but I still don't see him being as good as Messi was 4 years ago. And Argentina's group is not hard, but it's also not the easiest. Yes, Austria and Algeria each have stars playing in Europe's top clubs, and even Jordan showed that they could put up some remarkable games, like for example how we saw them defeat South Korea in the Asian Cup. So Argentina should not underestimate any of their opponents. Another team that I see could be the candidates to fail the whole tournament is Belgium. It feels like Rudi Garcia is not the right fit for this team, because he hasn't had the most convincing experience in his past teams, and he was fired from most of them. The players are good, but it feels like it's a mix between older players, like of the past generation, and younger players who don't know how to play such a big tournament yet. Belgium defense is not the most convincing. It feels like right now the plan that the Belgians have in their mind is to is to let Thibaut Courtois do all the work in the defense and compensate for their bad defenders with Thibaut Courtois' incredible saves, while at the same time doing good work in attack. Now this could absolutely work against teams in the group stage, Iran, Egypt and New Zealand, because they are clearly much worse than Belgium by transfer market, and none of them have made it out of the group stage at the World Cup. However, if they were to face a tough opponent like France or Germany, it would be hard for them to put up a good game against them. So I think that Belgium, even though they will make it out of the group stage, they could absolutely flop in the round of 16 or even round of 32. Okay, question number 4 I have is, who of the debutants will perform the best? We have 4 debutants at this tournament: Jordan, Uzbekistan, Curacao and Cape Verde. For me, Uzbekistan is the number 1 favorite to do the best out of the debutants. Their group is not easy, but it's easier than it could have been. They could at least beat the Democratic Republic of Congo, and even with 3 points they could still make it out of the group. So I think it's realistically possible for them to get at least 3 points and be one of the best third place team to make it out. Now, personally, I believe in Congo more, but again, I think anything could be possible. Cape Verde could beat Saudi Arabia, because right now the Saudi Arabian national football team is not in its best form. I don't think Cape Verde could make it out of the group, but they could at least beat Saudi Arabia and maybe even score 1 goal against Uruguay and Spain, even if losing to them at the end. As for the other 2 debutants, Jordan and Curacao, I think their group is very tough, but even they could at least try to put up remarkable games against their opponents. Okay, now at number 5, I have a very unstandard question. How will naturalized players perform at the World Cup? If you noticed, more and more teams are starting to naturalize players from other countries who have the roots of that country but were not born there and spend most of their career in another country. For example, most of Curaçao's players were born in the Netherlands. A lot of Haiti's players were not born in Haiti. Some Democratic Republic of Congo most important players such as Aaron Wan-Bissaka, Jonas Wiesa and Axel Tuanzebe were not born in Congo. Rani Khedira was not born in Tunisia, but in Germany. Nihat Juan Bani was born in France but used to play for the Ivory Coast, and we could go on and on with that list. Now, depending on how good the naturalized players will perform, it could completely change the dynamic of football. If at least one team who naturalized a lot of players will show off some good results, naturalization could become a new massive phenomenon. For example, Karim Adeyemi could switch to Nigeria or Romania after failing to get call-ups from the German national football team. Mason Greenwood might consider switching to Jamaica because he is not getting up call-ups to the England national football team after the scandal with rape that he was involved in, although I don't know if Jamaica themselves will call him either. And many other players. I think naturalization has both good and bad effects. But I think that with naturalization, some of the teams that we now consider weak could become much stronger and maybe even attempt to challenge the traditional powerhouses of football. So we'll just have to see what will happen. Okay, at number 7, I have one specific yes or no question. Or at number 6, sorry. Will Mexico break the round of 16 curse? Mexico has made it to the round of 16 from 2018 all the way back to 1994, but never gotten past this round, and many Mexican fans are eager for their team to finally break it this year. I think Mexico absolutely has what it takes to do it. They're playing all their home games in Mexico, all the way up to the quarterfinals. They got a very decent squad with some players who are very experienced, such as Raul Jimenez, and other players who are still young, such as Rodrigo Mora. And they have a very decent group, which is of course not easy, but it's also not super hard, with one of the World Cup favorites or the World Cup champions. Like how in 2022 they had a future champion Argentina, and in 2018 they had current champion Germany. Now they finally got a group where they don't have any of that. So I think they could absolutely break their records, break their curse. Sorry about that. They started very convincingly in a game against South Africa where they beat them 2-0 and could have easily made it 4-0 had the South African goalkeeper not made huge saves. Yes, South Africa wasn't the hardest opponent, but still, Mexico has not had such a convincing game at the other World Cups that they played in for a long time. So I think now Mexico's time could finally come. Okay, the next question I have is, will there be any disagreements about refereeing? Now, every time, both in club football and in national football, people blame referees for their decision. For example, in 2006 World Cup, where the Russian referee Valentin Ivanov showed the record number of red and yellow cards, some people were blaming him, although later it was confirmed that he actually did a decent job. In the Champions League final this season between Bayern and PSG, some people were claiming that the referee favored PSG. In the Champions League quarterfinal between Barcelona and Atletico, Barcelona's president Joan Laporta accused the referee of not doing his job appropriately. This World Cup will be a massive pressure because there are a record number of teams and it will be hard for referees to judge such a high number of matches with little breaks. But it's good that the VAR system now exists and it's possible to see what happened in more details. So I hope that there will be less arguments about refereeing, but unfortunately I still think that some arguments will arise. Okay, the next question I have is which player will be noticed by top clubs in Europe and will earn himself the right to go to another club? Many people are hyping up some young players such as Jan Diomande from Ivory Coast or Nika Past from Argentina, and I absolutely see that being possible, but I also think some other players could earn themselves a transfer. For example, Asman Diomande from Sporting, who was one of the reasons why they performed good in the Champions League last time, but no top club seem to be interested in him right now. I feel like this World Cup could be his chance. Another player who I absolutely see earning himself transfer to a top club is Gonzalo Ignacio from Sporting. He also had a very good season at both Sporting and the Portugal national football team, but unfortunately, he has not transferred to a top club yet. There were reports of clubs like Liverpool and Manchester United interested in him, but it hasn't turned into anything remarkable. So we will just have to see what happened. Also, in the same Ivory Coast team as Jan and Ousmane Diomande, we could absolutely see Basouman Touré from Hoffenheim earning himself a transfer to a top club. He was one of the reasons why Hoffenheim had a good season this year, and if he also backs his stats at the World Cup, he could absolutely earn himself a transfer to a top club. Okay, the next question I have is, will Cristiano Ronaldo and Neymar finally learn that they need to be on the bench sometimes and give up their egos? And will that help the national football teams? Now, don't get me wrong, Cristiano Ronaldo is one of the best players in the world. But every player has an age at which they no longer can perform for the full 90 minutes. I think Cristiano Ronaldo can no longer start for Portugal in every single game. He could still score some remarkable goals and be the mental leader like Luka Modric was for Croatia at the last World Cup and will probably be for this World Cup, but I don't think he is capable of single-handedly doing the job on his own. I think he will still be the main striker for the Portuguese national football team, but he will probably go on the bench on maybe like minutes 60 to 75. I think that would be the best outcome for the Portuguese national football team. And the question is, will he be able to react to that politely? If he will be able to, then Portugal could make it very fun in the World Cup if everyone knows that they have to play for the team. But if he starts getting upset about it and demonstrating his unhappiness, I think Portugal could absolutely flop and get out of the tournament earlier than they would otherwise have. For example, like last time they lost to Morocco. Same thing goes for Neymar. Now, this is just my opinion, but personally, I don't think that Neymar should have even been invited to the World Cup. Because he hasn't had the most convincing season at Santos, and he didn't play good at Al Hilal. But Carlo Ancelotti still called him, perhaps as a mental leader. Maybe he will even be able to score some goals. But at his age, I don't think the game can be built around him. I think Vinicius and Rafinha should be the main strikers. The question is, how will Neymar react to that, and what will his action on the field be? For example, in Russia, he spent more time simulating and pretending like other players are hurting him to win a penalty than actually scoring goals. And as a result, Brazil got eliminated to Belgium. In 2022, he had some moments but still didn't have the best of tournaments, and as a result, Brazil lost to Croatia on penalty. So the question is, will he now be able to get over his ego and not start at every game? I think if those players get over their egos, their teams could get very far. But if not, then I don't think those teams will win the World Cup. Again, the final last question I have is, how will the new expected tournament format with 48 teams and 3 hosts impact the tournament? Many people were skeptical about the expansion, saying that if teams know that they could get out of the group stage even in third place, they will show less convincing football. But honestly, the last matches that I have seen this World Cup, the last 4, I am very pleased with them. There wasn't a single goalless draw, and teams were truly trying to do their best to win the game. So I think that right now, what some skeptics were saying didn't end up being true. But unfortunately, this is only the first 4 matches. I hope that this trend will continue across the next matches, but I don't know how will it be. On paper, I see some upsides to this, like the fact that players who were previously on the bench might get some more chances because the coaches can't afford to utilize the same players in every game, and with the expanded tournament format, players will need some rest. But even with that, I still think that with 48 teams, there might still be some not so convincing results and some goalless draws. Also, the question is, how will having to get between 3 countries impact players? Other teams got lucky to play all of their games in one country or even in one city. Some teams got lucky like that, but other teams didn't get so lucky and will have to fly a bunch between their games. And the question is, how will flying so much impact their performance skills on the field? I hope that we will still see a good World Cup, because I know many people were also skeptical about the new Champions League format, and now many people are actually praising it, saying that it ended up being good, and I hope that the World Cup will end up being the same way, but I really can't say anything, because it really just depends on every single team and player. So there, guys, those are the top 10 questions that I'm most eager to see answered. You can write your questions in the comment. Like in all other videos, this is just my opinion. If you like this video, give it a thumb down. If you dislike it, or if you like this video, give it a thumb up. If you dislike it, give it a thumb down. Subscribe to my channel and leave comments. Bye guys, have a good day.